Welcome back to 101 East. The case of Rizana Nafeek, a Sri Lankan teenage maid in Saudi Arabia, has gained worldwide attention. Rizana was sentenced to death by beheading after confessing to killing a 4-month-old Saudi baby boy in 2005. She later retracted her confession, saying it had been made under duress, and an appeal has now been lodged in the Saudi Arabian courts. Now, 101 East spoke to her parents in Sri Lanka as they prepared to travel to Saudi Arabia to plead for their daughter's life.
Mohammed Nafeek, his wife Rizana and their 3 other children live in a poor village in war-torn eastern Sri Lanka. Nafeek's job as a woodcutter isn't enough to feed and support his family. In an emotional interview, Nafeek and Rizana told us why they allowed their eldest daughter to leave for Saudi Arabia.
கஷ்டத்தில் அனுப்புனேன், ஒன்றுக்கும் இல்லை, கவர் மேலே அனுப்புனேன். படிக்க விட்ட படிக்கிறதுக்கு வசதி இல்லாத கண்டு தான் அனுப்புனேன். எல்லாரும் போவே அவன் ஆசைப்பட்டுட்டா போகிறதுக்கு, அதெல்லாம் பேத்திக்க.
முஸ்லீம் நாடுன்னு சொல்லி தான் நாங்கள் அனுப்புனது, வேறு நாட்டுக்கு அனுப்பாமல் நாங்கள் அனுப்புனது.
சவுதின்னு சொல்லி நல்ல இடம்னு சொல்லி தான் அனுப்புனேன், என்ன சரின்னு சொல்லி கஷ்டத்தில் அனுப்புனேன். போய்க்கல கொஞ்சம் கவலையாட்டாக இருந்தது. போய்ட்டு மூட்டத்தில் ஒரு மாதத்தில் எங்களுக்கு கடிதம் வந்து எம்பாசால இருந்து இப்படி கூட ஃபுல்லாக ரிமாண்டில் இருந்துக்கிட்டு சொல்லி எங்களோட ஃபுல்லாக செஞ்சிருக்காது. நல்லா என்ன செய்கிற அல்லாவுக்காக என்னன்னாலும் எப்படின்னாலும் அவட கஷ்டகாலம் இருந்துக்கு அவருக்கு என்ன செய்கிற அப்படித்தான் பேத்தி என்ன செய்கிற கஷ்டம் வந்து தவறுதலாக செஞ்சாலும் மன்னிச்சிங்க சொல்லுங்க. என்ன துவா செய்கிறோம், அந்த மோசமான பிள்ளைக்கும் எங்களோட பிள்ளைங்க வந்துட்டோம்னு தான் நாங்கள் துவா செய்கிறோம்.
மோசமான பிள்ளைக்கும் துவா கேட்குறோம், அதுக்கு கிடைத்தான் கிடைக்கணும். மோசமான பிள்ளைக்கும் இந்த பிள்ளைக்கும் நன்மை கிடைக்கும். நம்ம புள்ள தலைமுறையாக இந்த பிள்ளை நினைக்கும். இப்போ புள்ள தலைமுறையாக நினைக்கும் தானே நம்ம மோசம் போனா தான் இப்படின்னு சொல்லி அந்த பிள்ளைலேருந்து வாக்குறதுக்குள்ளே மோசம் போன பிள்ளைக்கும் நன்மை கிடைக்கும் தானே. ஏதோ அல்லா சொர்க்கத்தை கொடுப்பாங்க.
நல்ல புள்ள எல்லாருக்கும் தெரியும்.
ஏதோ இறைவன் ஏற்பாடு இந்த பிள்ளைக்கு அப்படி நடந்துக்கேன்னு தவறுதெல்லாம் நடந்து
என்ன செய்யறோம், நாங்கள் மன்னிச்சுக்கிறோம். என்ன செய்ய.
The parents of Rizana Nafeek. Now, still in the studio are Sri Lanka's Minister for Foreign Employment, Kehelia Rambugwala, and Elena Sana from Migrant Forum Asia. In Hong Kong, we have Basil Fernando, who's with the Asian Human Rights Commission. Minister, we touched on the role of government very briefly in the first half. In a case like Rizana Nafeek, what is the proper role for a government to play in such a cross-border issue?
Well, this is not the first time we have had this experience. Once before, about 6 months ago, we had 4 others. Here, what we did was, in fact, there was again, I'm saying wide publicity saying that the government had refused to pay some legal fees. It's all total false, right? But we put the money as the last thing because we believe that there are so many other things that we could do to probably to talk to the authorities, get the religious leaders, take the parents over there, which we did.
Let me bring in Basil Fernando here. Basil, you said before the break that you think Sri Lanka has a bad record on this. What do they not do enough of?
Well, if there is a convention that the Sri Lankan government has signed, which is the Vienna Convention on the consular relations. In that, one of the rights of the government is to insist on legal representation for people who face criminal trials in the receiving country. Now, this very obligation the government did not carry out. Further, the government knew this case for and also the other cases for several years. What is it saying that we don't put money to cases? Now, if I am in Sri Lanka, if I am charged of a murder, I go to a high court in Sri Lanka. The government is under obligation to provide me legal assistance if I am poor. Does that obligation cease when a citizen goes to the other country?
All right, let's stop
Citizen is a citizen all the time.
See, I think he misunderstood what I said. I said I don't put the money first. Money plays a role, certainly. But, what they're trying to do is to say that Sri Lanka refused to pay the legal fees. In fact, we made all necessary arrangements to do.
But at base level, the accusation to a certain extent is that the consular representation is not robust enough. Do you think that Sri Lanka's position is robust enough?
Sorry, I didn't get you.
The consular representation and the position the Sri Lankan government takes with regards to other governments in the cases of defence of citizens. The accusation is that Sri Lanka does not do it well enough.
Well, it's a matter of interpretation. As far as Sri Lankan government is concerned, we have made many cases. We have made the conciliation efforts, we have made legal representations, we have made whatever that we can do within the limits. And also, one must understand that you have to respect also the laws of each country. You can't just go and bombard and say that, look here, because it is Sri Lanka, you know, I have sent somebody, you know, you change the law according to what I mean, that I don't think any sensible person will ever think or want to make that kind of request to the world.
This is not a lack of respect for the other countries' law. To represent your citizen in court is not a violation of law. This is simple, you know, this is a very simple thing. Any self-respecting other thing is, the money and the representation was not made by the Sri Lankan government. I represent the Asian Human Rights Commission. We paid the money.
Let's leave the case of Rizana for a moment and have a look at another case that we found in Sri Lanka. 40-year-old Shamini has just returned from Saudi Arabia after working there as a maid for 2 years. She told us how she was repeatedly raped by her employer and that she'd given birth to a son. She plans to give him up for adoption before returning to her family.
My first 6 months of work was fine, but during that time, Baba tried to touch me and I said I didn't like to do that. He asked me why and I said if I became pregnant, I could not go back to my family. He said that there would not be any problems. When Madam left the house, he would forcibly open my room door. He would come inside the room and he would tape my mouth shut and tie my hands. Then did whatever he wanted to me. The attacks became worse and I ran away. I found a place to work. It was at the home of a Jordanian family. They were good and they helped me. That's when I found out I was pregnant. I told Madam that I had some problems with the other Baba, and that is why I ran away. I also told Madam that I don't have a passport, but I wanted to work for her until I earned enough money to go back to Sri Lanka. How can I look after him? I already have 4 other children. I can't face my family members.
Ellen, let me ask you, that may have been an extreme case, but cases of physical and sexual abuse are probably vastly underreported from migrant workers. But how exactly does one address the problems in this circumstance?
Actually, we have several cases in our file of Filipinos being sexually abused as well. But I tell you, for example, in Dubai and even in Saudi Arabia, if only there is immediate intervention from our governments, you can actually file your case in Saudi Arabia. You don't have to wait to come home to the Philippines to be able to file your case.
But many maids won't even make the complaint. I mean, they're afraid to lose the job.
Precisely this is the point where we really have to expect a lot from our government, the information, that they can actually file a complaint. And we have several cases in Saudi where the perpetrators were penalized or were convicted.
Basil, are we over-sensationalizing the situation, as the minister sometimes suggests here? Or is the problem of abuse as bad as perhaps it might seem?
Problem of abuse is much worse than it has been portrayed by the media. You know, it is always the case on human rights that the number of people who complain are few due to very many difficult reasons. You know, in the countries like Sri Lanka, there is no witness protection or anything like that. So people who complain are the few daring people who come forward and say, this has happened to us.
Minister, let me put that to you then. You think the media is overblowing it. Basil thinks the media is not even getting close to the reality of the situation.
Well, I know he's entitled to his opinion. I'm not going to dispute on that. But there's one thing that I must say. This is exactly what I started with. Mr. Basil Fernand, who wants to emphasize on factors, he said, I paid the money. Now, the money plays the major role. What Sri Lanka government was ready.
I mean, you're going
at the same time, they asked whether they could. So, with these international organizations, human rights organizations, participation is exactly what we wanted, because that participation gives a complete exposure, right? But we never expect anybody to, pronounce this, amplify and say that we paid the money and I paid the money. I think this is, you're putting the whole thing into finances, so rupees and cents or the dollars, this is exactly what
it's
I said.
about responsibility. It's not about finances. It's about responsibility. It's not about finances.
Let me put this to you.
When you say I paid, not the government, and I paid, he insisted that I paid. I think which is.
Can I just put this to you? We're not talking specifically about the case of Rizana Nafeek. I want to leave that aside. Basil, excuse me, please, Basil. Can I just get a question in here? I don't want to talk about that specific case and the specific issue of money. I want to talk about the role of government here and your suggestion that perhaps the role of government should not be quite as great as our other guests seem to believe. Now, you've already said that there are thousands of people that complain to your government about their treatment. Whether or not they have money or you represent them or not, do you believe that that is too high, or do you think that's an acceptable number?
Well, nothing is acceptable. All have to be attended.
And therefore your policy is geared towards reducing that, and if so, how?
We have made many arrangements. We have done much studies on this. I think the other figure is also wrong, because in Saudi it's only 400,000, less than 400,000. It's around between 370 to 400,000. It's not 600,000, so it's 1/3 more.
But is it a priority for your government to do something about
Priority of the government is, we have understood, we have studied these programs. I think a better training has to be done. A better training back at home. Then a case studies has to be done. I agree with Mr. Fernando on one thing. We must increase the numbers of personnel who is handling these matters in their receiving country.
Let me pick up on another point you made. He mentioned better training. Is training actually a solution, training for the maids who leave the country?
Training and we would say pre-departure orientation seminars, for example, can help the migrant get a sense of what it's like going abroad. But again, as mentioned in the earlier footage, it's not just about it and that will guarantee protection for the migrants. Because the other side is that you have to have also some training and orientation on the employers and even on the receiving governments that, okay, we're trying to have this agreement that you need workers, so we send the workers there, but then there should be protection coming or commitment from both sides.
Okay, and there we will have to leave it. Thank you all very much indeed for coming in. That's all we have time for on 101 East. Until next time, bye-bye.